Good morning. My name is Eileen Lowry. I am the Vice President of Product Management for our integration portfolio. Let me get this going here. Hopefully this works. Nope, okay. Happy to talk to you today about powering your digital transformation, your digital business with a comprehensive API strategy. I'm based in the US, but I'm very excited to be here today. I've been at API Days in New York, and this is my second API Days of the year, so welcome and happy to be here. Let's look back. This is the 10-year anniversary of API Days, and if we take a step back in time, what were we talking about 5 to 10 years ago when it relates to APIs? We're talking about digital transformation. That's not a new topic, but we're really talking about it from a shift to the cloud, this hope and a wish that we were going to move to the cloud, and it was very slow moving as far as will we actually adopt this transformation to digital. This concept of API management was very much sort of, if we look back at Mark O'Neill's Gartner hype cycle, it was probably way down into the starting of the buzz and the hype as far as what is API management? Why do I need it? I have APIs, but do I really want to expose those? Do I want other elements of the organization or even externally for people to use that? We had a lot of security requirements because, of course, security is always sort of top of mind, but they were very technology-led in terms of how someone might need to implement security. And security was even also on Mark's chart this morning as far as why people need that. And I'll come to how that's evolved throughout the presentation. And as you also heard from Mark, a lot of the focus has been on REST APIs. And then, of course, you have JSON, you had SOAP. And it's funny because I pulled this view from our Institute of Business Value from about 7 years ago in July of 2016 of how we were talking about APIs and just this whole competing in the API economy, right? Trying to unlock new business models. You just heard from L'Oreal of how they're using their API management strategy, how they're trying to create winning experiences. And if you look at this, it was very primitive of I want to brand my APIs, I need to get adoption of APIs, I want to promote them kind of internally. We think about where we stand today, it's a very different world, and I'll talk more about that and why. If we think about what's going on in the economy and what's really been driving a lot of that change and that advancement when it comes to API management and using APIs and developing platforms, I think the number one thing that we see is really that growth in digital transformation. I just mentioned that 5-10 years ago, this concept of digital transformation was sort of known, but not really moving along. And now, what we've seen in the last 2 years, particularly driven by the pandemic and businesses having to react, is that shift to digitization happened very quickly in between 2019 and 2020. We saw it basically double from 16% to 34%. At the same time, we saw a lot of complexity grow because you have existing applications, you didn't necessarily want to touch those, but you needed to develop new ones, right? Whether it drove you to have a new travel expense, whether it drove you to have a new way in which you were working with your colleagues, all of these new applications and processes, for that matter, kind of evolved over the last few years. And yet you also still have your existing, whether they're legacy or whether they were recently built applications. And so between the combination of digitization and just overall increase in number of applications, we saw this huge amount of complexity. The stat there, 80% of organizations have said that they have up to 1,000 applications in their portfolio. That's a lot to manage. And if we all think about how many APIs might I have per application because I want to be able to invoke different services, or it's a consumer of some of those services, that becomes even more of a nightmare to have to manage those APIs. And then on top of all of this is the fact that because you've been building new applications, and because perhaps you did that very hastily, you've actually increased your exposure rates. And so this stat here from a Verizon investigation report from last year is just the attacks on web applications increased to make up 39% of all breaches in 2021. I'd love to see the refresh of that, but again, you heard from Mark hopefully earlier in the session about how much API security is increasing, and a lot of this is due to the fact that you've got more applications, you're trying to move quickly. There's no organization that I've met that says they have more than enough skills, right? So you're doing this with less time, less people, less skilled people, and yet you're trying to make sure that you're growing your business and that you're increasing, what you're trying to accomplish as far as the top line, growing your ecosystem. So what's the opportunity as a result of all this? It's really the fact that, to be relevant in today's digital world, to actually ensure that you can grow that top line, to grow your ecosystem, to interact with many different players, is the fact that it's expected that in today's world you have that agile connectivity. It's essential for your business to actually grow, and that's where we see, obviously, that's happening through APIs, through architectures that have this interconnectivity between digital systems and solutions from many different vendors like IBM, and being able to really have a combination of that ecosystem of startups for applications that you might be using or solutions you might be taking advantage of, to homegrown applications, to large vendors like IBM. And at the same time, combining all of this is the fact that if you're going to adopt that, right, we see that those types of businesses are that much more efficient, right, a 20% higher revenue potential by being more efficient, taking advantage of the fact that you are using APIs and architectures that are more interconnected. So where are we today, right? I talked about the 10 years ago, the fact that digital transformation was sort of on this rise. Now, what we see more than anything is not just an API-led integration approach as it relates to businesses trying to transform, but the combination of both APIs and events. There's various sessions here today, we've got a few ourselves, really explaining and talking about the fact that it's not just a world of APIs, right? APIs weren't even new 5-10 years ago. Earlier presentations talked about how APIs have been around for decades. The same is actually true for events. And when you think about how your business is going to transform, it's going to transform in multiple ways, right? Not just the fact that you've got more applications, you want to expose the information via APIs, but now you've got ongoing information. Right? It's not enough and sufficient for me to just be able to track my package, have a Kafka stream tell me when it's going to arrive at my door, or know that I've got, my flight notification through a stream of information that might change because of the weather. But the combination and possibilities of both an API call for where my seat is and the fact that I've got a stream of information about weather going on that might be useful for a promotion on the other side of an airline, right? In terms of telling me that because of this weather pattern and because of something that might be happening in terms of my flight and my preferences, here's a better option for me to go fly somewhere. Right? Maybe it's to not fly and take that flight. Right? So the possibilities of the combination of APIs and events is really on the rise today. The second part is just the fact, and you've heard from many different people throughout this conference so far, is just the criticality of APIs as part of not just the IT architecture as we list here, but really just the overall business itself. It's that essential to how a business grows. Now, you may not be saying the word API every other word out of a sentence as you're talking about your business strategy, but things like wanting to be better connected, or things like I want to be able to have this cross-promotional or omni-channel kind of experience for my consumers. All of that, when you take this step back, is about the fact that you're taking advantage of API management to enable all of that, and it's critical to any part of your IT architecture. The third piece here is really all that we see today of happening is all about business-led security requirements. Again, just to the example I was just saying, it's the business that's saying, I want to do this, whatever this is, whether it is I need to have a new KYC solution, or I need to have a new mobile app for my consumers to be able to shop online and purchase and then go pick up in store. All of that drives the kind of security needed to protect and ensure that the information that the business is going to expose is secure. Right? It's not just I need this for regulatory purposes, I need to have my security requirements in place to, whether it's PSD2 or whether it was, SOX compliance, for example, on the more financial side of the house. It's really all about now the business demanding things that it needs to do, which is requiring then enhanced security. And then last but not least, as you've heard from both Gartner earlier, as well as other sessions throughout the conference, is the fact that we're expanding beyond just REST and SOAP and JSON, but things like GraphQL, WebSockets, async APIs from an event standpoint. Really that expansion of the mechanisms by which you can expose information and how you can do that either faster, cheaper, really becomes important as part of your strategy, so that you give that flexibility to the IT teams, and particularly give them that flexibility so that as the business demands, which we all know are not slowing down, allows you to pick and choose the methodologies in which you are exposing information that are going to be most successful for your business. So what does this look like, right? In today's world, what is actually happening with clients that IBM is working with? One example here is our work with Heineken. They are the world's most, they're trying to become the best connected brewery. And this is where, as you can imagine, they've got thousands of restaurants and bars that want to order Heineken products. And in their past, implementations, it's been very point to point. So to be able to have a bar or restaurant order more product, right, or a distributor order more product, was not the most efficient, and their payment structure wasn't either, where they had 100% of their payments being able to handle through their API mechanisms. But with the use of our IBM API Connect, they were really able to become this highly connected brewery where they have thousands of applications now using API Connect and having all these business critical applications for over 350 of their brands connect in with their API management, with our API management technology. And they were able to connect, move away from the individual point-to-point integrations and have this platform that they can use so that any aspect of their business can take advantage of various APIs that are published across the business and be able to use that information again so that they can be the most connected, whether it's directly into those bars and restaurants that need to order, whether it's the behind the scenes for the payment to actually take place and ensure that the payment is not a fraudulent payment, and do that most effectively throughout their business. So a great example of where they've moved from that very archaic point-to-point set and implementation of how their business ran to just being a very highly connected brewery in today's digital and modern world with still a physical product in hand. So I mentioned API Connect a few times, but IBM's product in market is IBM API Connect. It's our comprehensive full lifecycle management product. And if you were in Mark's session before, you saw us up in the upper quadrant along with some of our peers as it relates to our leadership in this space. We've been in this space for over a decade, starting in 2011, actually, with our first API management product. And we are hyper-focused on continuing to innovate within our product. Of course, we have the ability to create APIs, manage those, secure them, socialize them, monetize them, use analytics for insights to understand how many APIs are actually being consumed, or just to have an API out there that isn't being used at all. But we also continue to enhance and expose more functionality day in and day out, whether that is around API testing, making sure that your APIs, where you can't figure out all of the tests possible of how an API could be used. Continue to enhance our capabilities using AI, where you might be able to generate, have random tests being generated for you, so that way you're understanding the exposure that a particular API may be having on your application or your organization overall. So really full set of capabilities. It connects in with our data power gateway. You heard earlier about the importance of the gateway, and just comprehensive set of capabilities that we've had in market and continue to innovate around. We also provide huge amount of flexibility. And this is where we provide our software technology as one option. You can deploy that to any cloud from a Kubernetes standpoint, deployed on VMs. We also have what we call our Cloud Pak for integration, which combines multiple sets of integration capabilities. In many cases, as you probably all know, you go from having to create your API to want to use that to integrate with a set of applications. Or vice versa, you create your integration and you want to expose that as an API. The Cloud Pak for Integration provides all of those capabilities combined so that you can have that seamless experience from creating your APIs to then using that to manage your integration, as well as then exposing through the gateway, and as well as bringing in things like your enterprise messaging capabilities. And then last but not least is SaaS. As I mentioned before, we've all been on this journey of digital transformation, both our customers as well as I'm sure all of you, as well as IBM. And this is where SaaS just provides that easier flexibility to not have to worry about managing all of that infrastructure, of course, and just be able to consume as a service, whether that's in a single tenant environment in our IBM cloud, or whether that is in a multi-tenant environment on AWS, taking advantage of numerous native AWS services such as Lambda and some of the other native functions that AWS provides. And a great partnership with them to continue to expand on all of our functionality and being right where developers are working day in and day out with their applications. This has a mind of its own. So another example I want to talk about in terms of digitization that's happening is a company called Finology. They're a Luxembourg-based company, and they've been on this mission to help customers and clients of their own in the banking and insurance space around the application of Know Your Customer KYC. As you can imagine, if you've signed up for a bank account yourself recently or tried to apply for a mortgage or a car loan, or even as a small business tried to apply for a loan, anytime you're trying to open up one of those kinds of accounts, they need to verify who you are, right? And that's actually been quite an arduous process. And there are many different companies that are trying to tackle this problem, but it's actually not an easy one. And as many companies have been on this digital transformation journey, a lot of what that process has been paper-based, right? And trying to ensure then that as you've written your name and your address and who you are and whether it's your identification number or what country or nationality you are, they're trying to combine all this different information to ensure you are who you are, and make sure that as they are either giving you that money or opening that account, that is not a fraudulent set of activities that are going on. And so Finology has been on this journey to not only digitize that process, right, but provide easy access API capabilities so that you can hook that into your process, whether that is a tier 1 bank or whether that is an insurance company, that you can just call their services, right, and be able to understand more instantaneously and open up that account, because we all know that we want to have access to that account almost immediately as a consumer. And they've been helping reduce really that time in which it takes to go from 15-page paper where you're writing out information to an 8 to 10 minute process, and actually increase then the number of banks actually converting those customers to being an actual customer over 6 times based on the paper-based process. So great use of API Connect, again, creating the APIs that are most important to connect into those different business processes to ensure and validate who you are, as well as then, of course, the digitization journey in and of itself. So I've talked a lot about where it was API management and digital transformation 5 to 10 years ago. Talked a bit about where it is today, but let's talk about where is it going, right? I talked a bit about events and working with events and event-led integration as well as API-led integration, but we see this expanding and exploding, and that events become just as important as APIs. And so I know the folks before me also talked about that they're in a data organization and they've got APIs and event-driven architecture. We see the same. We see the fact that APIs and events are coming together. There's a huge amount of opportunity and untapped potential when it comes to using events inside an organization. And at the same time, it's going to have very similar characteristics of needing to manage the life cycle of those events, the actual discovery of those events within an organization, the governance and life cycle of those events, just as it is for APIs, and actually being able to discover, right, and manage the fact that you've got all these different events happening in your organization, and in many cases they're sitting in that silo of that department, but having the opportunity to expose those and make those available such that you can incorporate them right into your application or your business process itself, and start to actually define situations so you can detect and understand what's going on. You heard earlier also from Gartner about discovery of APIs. This is another area that we see exploding tremendously because many different companies have multiple API management vendors. And with all of these applications, as I mentioned earlier, kind of being created over the last 2 years with the pandemic, just the fact that you've got different businesses that may have created applications but haven't necessarily brought them into their central teams, and they've exposed APIs and exposed their business where those APIs aren't actually being managed appropriately. And so discovering the unmanaged APIs as a means to cull for both security purposes as well as for potential reuse and monetization, I think, is where we see another extremely high trend happening in the API management space, which kind of lends itself into the whole enhanced security, which I touched on briefly. But this is where we see, again, a lot of opportunity when it comes to discovery and using AI to actually detect what is going on in your estate when it comes to APIs. And are you exposing yourself to those web breaches and those web attacks that I mentioned earlier? And in general, because we all know that there's no company out there that I've seen that says, I have more than enough API skills, I've got more than enough developers, where we see the potential benefit really here is taking advantage of AI-powered tooling. I briefly mentioned the fact that we've infused AI-based testing of APIs in our product. This really as a means to help the developer be more productive, right? You're never going to know all of the possibilities of how your API is going to be used. So let AI generate tests and tell you how your API might be exposed or how you might have an opportunity to improve upon how you've built your API. We also see this, as I said, as a means and use case for enhancing security. Detect anomalies and patterns in how you're using your APIs, and this becomes, again, an opportunity for you to be more productive as the developer, as well as the overall organization, because now you're understanding better what might be happening with those applications, with those APIs, and how you need to better protect yourself. And then last but not least, the last trend that we see is really around just more cloud-native architecture and microservices driving more of the evolution and just at a greater pace and speed than perhaps the last 5 to 10 years. And this is all as, again, either new applications being built or as companies are on that much more accelerated digital transformation journey, they are breaking down those applications, creating more of those microservices, which is creating different and new architectures. And just the fact that you need that much more API management, which drives more security, which drives more potential monetization, and just that overall nature then of how that's driving more usage of API management solutions. So if I start to wrap up here, one last example I want to give you of again, a company that has a physical product around dairy is Tina, which is a Norwegian dairy company, which is using API management to actually drive its entire business. And if we think about one of the themes for this conference about sustainability, right? They've got a physical product, they're a dairy company, and they're using APIs to actually improve their transportation costs, as one example, for where milk gets delivered. Because they have multiple products. Milk can be used just in the store as milk, it can be turned into cheese, it can be used for many other products, but they need to be efficient with the quality of the milk itself. And so while they've got their processes around, from a physical standpoint of the quality of the milk, they're using APIs and transforming into their digital processes where the milk should actually go from a transportation standpoint. And they're running their entire business. They've incorporated 32 different legacy systems. They've got over 100 different integrations that they've built and incorporated into their use of IBM API Connect. And they're really focused on continuing to go from their central sort of competency to exploding that out and empowering the rest of their business lines in taking advantage of the digital processes that they've created, as well as just the APIs that are being incorporated into each of those different applications as they continue to enhance upon their transportation costs and really lower the number of misdirections for those trucks. So I'll wrap up with just where you can get started with IBM API Connect. You can visit us on our website to learn more about API Connect. You can actually sign up for a free trial, get started on AWS today, or you can come by our booth 201, chat with myself, chat with some of our SMEs, watch a demo, sign up for the trial. We can walk you through the trial right then and there, and hope to see you over there. Thank you.